You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Welcome to episode 38 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. I am Walt White, your host for the evening, and I've got a variety of things I want to talk about. I've got a couple of little updates I want to do before we get rolling into the news. I have 3 pieces of news, only 2 pieces of featured content. I have to be truthful here and say that I've kind of slacked off, and I didn't get around to even starting the 3rd piece of featured content. There's a really cool looking write-up and video associated with something from Gun Free Zone, but there's an embedded like 70-minute video, and I just haven't gotten around to it, so I had to push that one off. Maybe I'll do it next week if I can get the chance to sit down and watch all of that video. I have a cigar and drink pairing for you, and a discussion topic that I'm sort of lukewarm on. I may change it on the fly as we get closer, but first things first, if you've been following along with the Taurus gun saga that I've been sharing with you for the last couple of weeks, you're aware that my brother purchased a Taurus PT709 Slim a little over a month ago at a local gun show. He had some issues with it. He sent it back to Taurus, and he was expected to have the gun repaired and sent back to him in 4 weeks. After Taurus received the gun, they sent him a letter with an in-house tracking number so that he could track the progress of the repair through the Taurus Warranty Center website. And over the past about 3.5 weeks, he's been periodically checking the website, and it's not showing anything. It doesn't appear as though they have worked on his gun at all. And he was getting kind of antsy about it. They're getting really close to the end of the 4-week time frame that they quoted him, and he decided to give him a call. So he called earlier this week, and he got frustrated. He was on the phone for just a really long, aggravating time on hold, and he said that he finally got frustrated. He hung up the phone, and a couple of days later he called back, tried again. This time he got in touch with a customer service rep. The service rep asked him for the serial number of the gun. He looked it up in the system, and he says, "Oh wow, we've had this for a little while, but let me check into it." As it turns out, the Taurus repaired the gun and then sent it off to some sort of accuracy center or accuracy division within the company to have the gun tested for accuracy. And apparently, while they were accuracy testing the gun, it broke again, and they had to send it back to the repair shop. So it was fixed. They accuracy tested it, fired it to make sure that the sights were on and the gun was functioning properly, and it broke again and had to go back to repair. So at this point, the customer service rep was supposed to get back to my brother today, because he called and talked to him on Friday, and today is Monday. I haven't talked to my brother since. I don't know what the latest update is on the Taurus saga, but I will keep you in the loop as we go forward. The more my brother tells me, the more I will share with you. I'm really disappointed in this whole thing, but it seems like progress is being made, although just things aren't really looking good at this point. Outside of that, the first thing I wanted to do before we talked about anything was remind you about the contest that I'm running on my blog, WaltInPA.com. Every month I'm going to be giving away a signed copy of Shoot, Your Guide to Shooting in Competition by Julie Golob. During the month of May, I've made things super simple. All you have to do is go into my blog, look up the contest post. It'll say something along the lines of win a free copy of Shoot May edition. Click on that, It'll give you a blog post with all the details listed, you know, when the cutoff date is, the particulars on how to enter, or how many times you can enter, you know, things like that. And it's really simple. All I'm asking for is the last thing on your want list. Not necessarily your need list, just gun-related items that you want for the sake of wanting. You know, you really have to have no need for them. Just, we all have this list of gun items that we want, and mine seems to be growing every day, and it's getting even longer as I see people responding to this contest post. So head on over to waltinpa.com, look for the May contest post, click on it, get your entry in. It'll only take you a few seconds, and keep your fingers crossed to be selected randomly as the winner at the end of May. The last thing I wanted to talk about before we rolled into the news is I wanted to do a little bit of an update on USPSA shooting, and I know some of you are sighing at this point because the competition shooting really isn't your thing. However, I wanted to talk a little bit about gun handling skills in general, not so much USPSA, although it does relate. Over the weekend, I shot a USPSA match at a local club, and a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't really feeling well. I shot one match, and then I was sick the following week, and then, you know, I was back up and around the following week, and I didn't do any dry fire practice. I didn't spend any time at the range. It was just 2 weeks of absolutely not touching a gun. And when I finally got to the range this past weekend to do some shooting, it really showed. It's amazing how fast these gun handling skills decay when you're not actively practicing them. When I got to the range, you know, I usually, when I shoot a match, my first stage is usually not real great. It usually takes me a stage or two to warm up, and then at that point, you know, I'm feeling good, I'm loose, I'm shooting well, and it really shows. The more stages I shoot throughout the day, the better I seem to do. So when I didn't really do so well on the first stage, it wasn't a total surprise. However, just how lethargic and slow and uncoordinated I felt was a huge surprise. And I didn't shake that feeling until really late in the match. So, you know, let this be a lesson to you. Get out there and practice with your guns, because you may find yourself in a situation where, you know, you pull that gun out and it just feels like you're working through molasses. You know, your movements are slow, just nothing feels right. So hit the range often and practice as much as your wallet allows you to. I guess that's the moral of the story. So with all that said, let's get rolling into the news. All right, well, the first item up in the news segment is just a feel-good story. The moment I laid eyes on this, I knew that I had to share it in the podcast. You know, it's not your typical gun-related news article where it's a case of self-defense or, you know, gun politics in the news. This is just sheer feel-good. So here we go. This comes out of WTOP out of Washington, D.C., and it is entitled, "Scout Develops Device to Make Reloading Gun Easier." It was published on Tuesday, May 1st, and it goes on to say, Brian Nell is only in 7th grade, but his ingenuity has already made a device in the life of a wounded veteran, made a difference in the life of a wounded veteran. The Brunswick Middle School student wants to be a physician's assistant, but his latest innovation has him thinking about a part-time career as an engineer, he said. Brian, a Boy Scout, has made a device that makes it easier to reload a 9mm pistol magazine one-handed. I have airsoft guns, Brian said, referring to replica guns that fire plastic pellets. Those always interested me. While Brian's innovation may sound advanced for a 12-year-old, it not only has a practical use, but it has also made a huge impression on the man for whom it was intended. Adam Kizowelski, a retired Marine sergeant, lost his left arm and right leg in a bomb blast during a sweep for insurgents at a school outside of Al-Kamara, Iraq on August 21, 2005. The blast killed his platoon leader, 2nd Lieutenant James Cathy. It was a pretty violent area and a pretty violent time. We were getting into stuff pretty frequently, Kizowelski said. Kizowelski finished high school in Wisconsin early to join the Marines in 2002. He now lives in a ranch home in Thurmont with a large U.S. flag flying out front and a shooting range out back. It was there that his friend, David Statton, noticed Kisielski had trouble reloading magazines for his rifle and pistol, Statton said. Statton, who is retired from the Navy and works at the U.S. Public Health Service at Fort Detrick, mentioned Kisielski's troubles to his colleague, Timothy Nell, Brian's father. Statton thought the elder Nell, an avid woodworker, could make a device to help. Brian, needing a science project, took note of the men's work and sought to improve it. After some online research and a trip to the hardware store, a prototype was made, but it was proven too tough to handle one-handed, Brian said. On a second attempt, Brian, with his dad doing the dangerous work, came up with a design that includes a spring-loaded mount on a metal rod to hold the magazine upright. Brian added a commercially available loader that he modified to lock into place so that bullets could be loaded into the standing magazine. My friend Jack, he wants to be a Marine too, and I just like to know if something happens to people, I can help him, Brian said. The device is screwed onto a board that Kisielski can bolt to his all-terrain vehicle to prevent it from slipping as he reloads. Brian presented the final product to Kisielski at Operation Second Chance, an organization in Clarksburg to help wounded veterans. Kisielski is a vice president. I'm probably butchering this name. It's kind of complicated and a little long, but I'm just sort of running with the pronunciation that I've got. Kisielski called Brian's work ingenious and awesome. It is something I never would have ever dreamed up, he said. And I'm 28 years old. I think he's definitely got a career in engineering in front of him, or whatever else he wants to do. Knowing that people like Brian are interested in helping make his life easier propels Kisielski forward, he said. I've also had a lot of drive in life, but with so many people in your corner, it's hard to fail, he said. Brian's project won first place at the Middle School Engineering Division of the Frederick County Public Schools Science and Engineering Fair and was the first runner-up in the overall middle school division, according to the FCPS news release. Brian plans to submit the device at the state level this summer, he said. We're thinking about patenting it, he said. So, this article is just full of feel-good things. There's a photo of the injured veteran and the inventor using the device, and it looks pretty simplistic, but it seems as though it's really getting the job done. The intriguing part about this whole thing is that it was done sort of as a school project, and with the way schools are now, I'm really surprised that he wasn't reprimanded for trying to do something that involved working with ammunition or had an intended use that involved firearms of some sort. Maybe including the veteran in this whole thing sort of ease the mindset of the school board or the teachers, or maybe Fredericksburg's just different than, at least here in Pennsylvania or some of the other states where we've heard these horror stories of kids getting reprimanded for eating a slice of pizza in the shape of a gun and pointing it at another student. But again, this is just a feel-good story through and through, and I'm really happy for this kid and the veteran that he helped out. Well, news item 2 sort of builds on something that I've talked about in a previous podcast. I don't remember precisely what episode it was, but during one of the news pieces, I mentioned that legislators in Pennsylvania were trying to eliminate the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system for handgun purchases. Basically, people say that it is redundant, it is faulty, it's problematic, and it causes more trouble than it's worth. And the idea was to use the national InstaCheck system instead, because it was much more reliable. And here is a prime example of why we really need to do away with the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system. This particular post comes from AmmoLand, and it is entitled Pennsylvania Warning an Outage of State Gun Check System This Month. The Pennsylvania State Police recently announced that the Pennsylvania InstaCheck system, PICS, for licensed firearms retailers will be unavailable for use from 10 p.m. on Saturday, May 19th until approximately 10 a.m. on Tuesday, May 22nd. This outage is due to an upgrade of the Pennsylvania Access to Criminal History System, PATCH, which is utilized by the Pennsylvania State Police and the public to obtain criminal history record checks. Unfortunately, this will affect firearm purchases and transfers through licensed dealers throughout the state. The NRA encourages you to plan your firearm purchases around this outage so that you are not inconvenienced. The PIC shutdown comes at a time when the Pennsylvania legislature is considering legislation eliminating the state-run background check system, House Bill 2127, introduced by State Representative Tim Krager, would eliminate the duplicative and unnecessary state-run background check system for the purchase of firearms and solely utilize the existing National Instant Criminal Background Check System, NICS. Currently, this bill has been referred to the State House Judiciary Committee for further consideration. For more information, click here. So, here's a prime example of why we need to get rid of this system. Essentially, your Second Amendment rights. Well, I don't want to say your Second Amendment rights are put on hold from May 19th to May 22nd. However, you can't purchase a gun from a dealer from May 19th to May 22nd, and that is a serious issue. Private sales are still going to be fine with long guns. That won't be an issue. However, what do gun shops do? I mean, most of them sell firearms. Their bread and butter isn't accessories and ammunition. I would think the bulk of their businesses is going to be dealing in firearms themselves, which all require this instant check system, the Pennsylvania instant check system. So I have to think that this is going to hurt, a lot of these mom and pop or brick and mortar gun shops all throughout the state, where they're basically going to be shutting down for a couple of days. And I think this is more fuel on the fire of, let's get rid of the PIC system and just use the national system, because we shouldn't be dealing with outages like this. I just think that this is completely unnecessary, and there is certainly a better way to do it, and I think the national system is the better way to do it. Well, the last piece of news comes from Nick. Last week, Nick left a comment on episode 37, and he provided a link to this news article for inclusion in this episode. And it's funny because I saw this news article on the PAFOA forum. When I initially saw the forum thread, the subject line of the thread, I'm thinking, this has to be either some sort of chain letter or some kind of joke. We've all seen them before, where the stupid criminal does something, and the valiant Marine or the valiant veteran comes in and saves the day, and it's just one of those things where you can't really believe this. I mean, how stupid can someone be? Well, it turns out that someone really was this stupid, and this news article was in fact not a joke, but it really happened. So I thought I would share it with you. This comes from the jdnnews.com. It was published on April 28, 2012, and it is entitled DA, Deaths Were Justified. Goes on to say, prosecutors announced Friday that they will not press charges against 2 Camp Lejeune Marines and a civilian who fought for their lives and killed 2 local men who were burglarizing their Jacksonville home earlier this month. Maurice Skinner, 33, of Bank Street, and Diego Everett, 33, of Greytown Road, were shot and killed by residents of 107 Country Club Drive around 2 a.m. on April 15th. District Attorney Ernie Lee refused to publicly identify the residents involved in the shooting. He said it was clear from the evidence that the state's castle doctrine, which allows for deadly force in defending one's home, and self-defense laws apply in this case. After investigation by the Jacksonville Police Department and reading the statements of the witnesses, it is clear that Everett's and Skinner's death were justified because of the actions of Everett and Skinner in burglarizing the residence and assaulting, robbing, and threatening to kill the occupants of the residence, Lee said. Family of the descendants present during Friday's press conference said that they didn't believe Lee's version of events. Lee told them that whether they accepted it or not, Skinner and Everett's deaths were justified under state law. Lee methodically recounted the events of April 15th, referring to the descendants by name and calling the other 3 men involved the Marine resident, civilian roommate, and Marine friend. At an ATM withdrawal, witnesses and GPS tracking placed the 3 men in the Emerald Isle area until they returned home around 1:40 a.m. After entering the house, the Marine resident noticed his dogs acting strange and found the sliding glass doors leading to his backyard damaged with a pry mark on the frame and a broken latch on the doors. Skinner came out of the bedroom area of the house carrying the Marine resident's Mossberg Model 88 12-gauge shotgun, which had been under the Marine resident's bed. Skinner shined a light in the Marine resident's face and then struck him in the face with the butt of the shotgun. Skinner ordered the Marine resident to get on the floor. Everett came out of one of the bedrooms and ordered the civilian roommate and Marine friend, who were coming down the hall, to also get on the floor. Skinner demanded all their cell phones and wallets. Everett took their wallets, but all three had set down their cell phones when they entered the house. Skinner and Everett then told the three men that they were going to kill them. Skinner placed the shotgun to their heads and told them that he was going to shoot them. Skinner demanded duct tape and rope. Once the Marine resident realized that these men were going to tie them up, the Marine resident believed that he and his friends were going to be killed, Lee said. Skinner, who had 4 children, and Everett, who was the father of 5, asked the Marine whether they had children. Skinner said he would not shoot anyone with children, but would shoot the ones who didn't. The Marine resident saw Skinner look away momentarily and realized that this was his chance to act, Lee said. The Marine resident grabbed the shotgun. He and Skinner started struggling for it. The fight ended up in one of the bedrooms. Skinner called for help, and Everett came into the room and hit the Marine resident several times in the head and ear with a crowbar. The Marine resident, momentarily blacked out, came to and called for help. The Marine friend entered the bedroom, and Everett attacked him with the crowbar. The Marine resident and Skinner were struggling on the floor. Skinner said, "You are going to die now," and squeezed the trigger of the shotgun repeatedly, Lee said. The gun did not fire. Apparently, Skinner did not realize that while the Marine resident kept the shotgun loaded, he did not keep it pumped and chambered. The Marine resident was able to wrestle the shotgun from Skinner's grip. Skinner came at the Marine resident, who was on the floor, and the Marine resident shot Skinner twice in the torso. The civilian roommate entered the room. The Marine resident shoved him out of the way and ran to the other side of the bed, where his Marine friend and Everett were still struggling. The Marine resident shot Everett in the buttocks with the slug exiting in his stomach area. Ooh, that's gotta hurt. Everett turned around, and believing the intruder to still be a threat, the Marine resident shot him in the right armpit area. Everett crawled toward the object beneath the bed. The Marine friend broke a wine bottle over at Everett's head, and Everett stopped moving. Police found a flashlight under the bed. The 2 Marines and civilian roommate had significant injuries and were transported to Oslo Memorial Hospital. The Marine resident had scratches and bruises on his chest and back. He had deep cuts on his chin, right ear, and the back of his head. The civilian resident had cuts to the top of his head and stippling on his arm from the shotgun being fired near him. The Marine friend had a deep cut to the top of his head. Crime scene investigators found blood on the steps of the carport, kitchen, dining room area, hallway, and bedroom. Skinner and Everett, who were dead when authorities arrived, were wearing gloves and dark clothing. They had a total of $161.55 in their possession. Skinner and Everett have both served prison time. Skinner for assaulting and Everett for larceny and drugs, according to the NC Department of Correction. The Marines and civilian roommate do not have criminal convictions. JPD detectives David Brown and Richard Kellum learned of 2 separate motor vehicle break-ins committed the night of the incident at a nearby house on Country Club Drive. A phone from those 2 break-ins was recovered inside the residence with Skinner and Everett. There was property from the vehicle break-ins recovered in the business across the street from where the shooting occurred. Detective examined the cell phones of all 5 men and found no common numbers called between the descendants and the residents. Decedents. I'm calling them descendants. But either way, these deaths, although tragic for the decedents' families, are justified pursuant the facts and circumstances of the investigation and the law of North Carolina, Lee said. Lee said he appreciated the hard work of JPD and assistance by the Naval Criminal Investigations Service. JPD Sheriff Mike Yanero said his detectives are still investigating how Skinner and Everett arrived in the Country Club Drive area before their deaths and criminal charges may apply. The chief said Crime Stoppers tips have aided the investigation. Crime Stoppers of Oslo County is offering a reward of up to $2,500 for additional information in the case. Anyone with information, blah, 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 call them and stuff. So, kind of a long news article, but the gist of it is you've got these two burglars that seem to make stupid mistake after stupid mistake. It sounds as though they break into a vehicle, they steal some stuff out of the vehicle. For some reason, more property is found inside a local business across the street, and then even more property from the vehicle is found inside the Marine's home. It's just, it's compounding stupidity, and, you know, to bring all of this to a head, these two guys break into the home of a Marine, and, you know, they end up dying over it. So, in a sense, it's good because, you know, the good guys lived, and it sounds as though they're not beat up too bad. I mean, I would prefer to see them with no injuries whatsoever, but, you know, in the end, they got out okay, and, you know, the bad guys lost. So, pretty interesting news article overall. It's kind of a big, long, detailed story, but I'm really glad that they're not going to pursue charges against anyone involved. You know, the criminals are dead. You know, as far as at least I'm concerned, this is over and done with, and, you know, hopefully these people can get on with their lives, and you know, there's not a lot of recovery time involved and things like that. So that is going to conclude the news. Alright, to kick off the featured content portion of this episode, I have something that I came across from When the Balloon Goes Up, and I thought it was really interesting, and as soon as I saw it, I started typing up a really big, long comment. I wound up closing the browser window by accident. I lost the bulk of it, and, you know, I considered rewriting it, doing a blog post about it, but eventually just procrastination took over. I never got around to it, but I did want to talk about this article and sort of put some of my thoughts out there on the comparison. And the article is entitled, I Think I Know Why IDPA is Outpacing USPSA. I know this is going to be kind of boring for the non-competitive shooting types in the audience, but it's good if you're sort of on the fence about considering one shooting discipline over the other. You know, maybe this will help maybe give you that nudge one side or the other in terms of IDPA versus USPSA. And he makes some very valid points, and I agree with him for the most part through a lot of the comparisons that he makes. The first comparison that he begins to make is the gear limitations, and he talks about IDPA being able to use what you carry, and that was one of the most appealing things for me, and is actually one of the most appealing things about IDPA. Being a USPSA shooter, I really don't want to go into IDPA using my USPSA stuff. I can probably get away with shooting in the exact same setup that I use for USPSA in stock service pistol. It's just a Glock 17, plastic outside the waistband, Phobos holster, and Blackhawk magazine pouches. So, you know, it's nothing really specialized. And the reason why I can do that is because I shoot production division. It is the largest division in USPSA, and it allows shooters that are new to the sport, or people that just don't want to get into the racy type guns and the racy type equipment, a place to shoot and use sort of off the shelf equipment. And that's precisely how I got into the sport. I walked into a gun shop. I decided I wanted a Smith & Wesson M&P. I bought one. A couple of weeks later, I picked up a holster from the same gun shop. It was a Phobos roto paddle, like $20-some holster, no big deal. And then later on, I picked up a couple of ITAC magazine pouches, again, right off the shelf, the same gun shop, and I had my USPSA production rig. Same equipment, from what I understand, can be used in IDPA for stock service pistols. So it's really it's a touchy subject to start comparing the gear from one to the gear of another, especially when you're looking at production division. Now, if you look past production division, or, you know, there also is a like a stock revolver division too, but we can sort of overlook that as well. When you start looking at limited division and open division, he's absolutely right. There is just no contest. USPSA is really complicated, and those guns in those divisions are race guns. You know, they're compensated. In open division, there are optics. There are big, giant, extended magazines with as many rounds as you can pack into. I think it's like 192 millimeters. So when you step out of production division, things get kind of intimidating. You see these pretty big, fancy, just wild-looking guns in these tiny little bikini-style holsters that all they do is cover up the trigger guard, and the muzzle of the gun slips over top of like a little nylon stub. So there's very little movement to get it out of the holster, again, for speed. So in terms of gear for IDPA versus USPSA, it's more or less a wash if you're looking at production division. If you're looking at getting into the racier type stuff, then IDPA obviously wins out. I think enhanced service pistol allows you some upgrades, but again, I'm not an IDPA shooter, so I really don't I don't know what that division affords you, and I'm trying to stay sort of neutral. I mean, I have never shot IDPA, and I know very little about it, so I don't want this to turn into I shoot USPSA, so it's better. I just want to clarify this a little bit from my perspective. Yeah, the author is familiar with IDPA, but not USPSA, and I am more or less the exact opposite. I'm a USPSA shooter with no IDPA experience. The next thing he talks about is plausible deniability. IDPA and USPSA are both races. Those that say they aren't are lying. There's a built-in exception for excuses for slower shooting with defensive style shooting and things like that. USPSA doesn't have that other goal, so if you aren't progressing, it means that you aren't putting in the time, or you just aren't capable. No one wants to think that. I shoot with a broad range of shooters with varying skill sets. I'm the competitive type. If I'm not showing growth in my shooting, I'm getting I don't want to say annoyed, but it does bother me. I want to go to a match. I want to see myself perform better than the match before. If that means putting in time dry fire practicing, then that's what I'll do. I don't do it nearly as often as I should, but I try to do some dry fire practice. I try to improve my gun handling skills without hitting the range. Ammunition costs get kind of expensive when you're running multiple practice sessions as well as USPSA match. One of the things he also mentions is actually we'll get into that later. The next thing he talks about is the ranking system, and it's kind of funny because he says that the lowest IDPA classification is marksman. I think it's novice. I believe Miguel commented way down toward the bottom that novice is the base class. But either way, he says that shooters don't really feel that embarrassment of saying, I'm a novice or I'm a marksman versus the IDPA lowest classification of D. However, D is not the lowest classification in... Actually, I guess theoretically, or technically, it is the lowest classification in USPSA. However, no shooter starts out as a D-class shooter. All new shooters start out as U, which is unclassified. You earn that D. Whether or not you're proud of that D, you earn it. You need to put in at least 4 classifier matches, or classifier stages, and generally you're shooting 1 classifier stage per match. A lot of the local clubs in this area mix one national classifier stage in with the other various stages that we're shooting, and it generally takes you 4 classifier stages to become classified. It takes 4 initially. After that, they're using 6 of your best 8 or something. It gets kind of complicated, and I'll submit to that. It gets very complicated. But if you're shooting 1 USPSA match per month, it's going to take you 4 months worth of matches to get classified. Now, there are special classification matches. They're generally either held in the beginning of the season or the end of the season for people that need the extra stages to become classified. And I guess you could go to one of those matches, shoot all your classifier stages right then and there during that special match, and then be classified. But generally, you're putting in some work to get that potential D class. It's very possible to start shooting USPSA and classify outside of D. I started unclassified when I got all my classifier stages in. I was classified C. I was like barely made it in C, but I went from unclassified to C nonetheless. There have been shooters that go from unclassified to B if they're exceptionally, they have exceptional gun handling skills and things like that. So, you shouldn't be ashamed of that D. You earn it for the most part. At least as far as I'm concerned, you earn it. Just sort of breezing through his list really quick. Actually, I think that's about all the topics that I wanted to cover. I thought this was a little bit longer than it was, but in terms of, or actually, there was a mention of ability, and USPSA is more faster paced. They're larger stages. IDPA is more new shooter friendly. And this actually came up at the last match that I was shooting. There was a conversation between an IDPA shooter and a USPSA shooter, and oddly enough, they had opposing views, and not the way you would think. The USPSA shooter was saying that new shooters should start in IDPA. The IDPA shooter was saying that new shooters should start in USPSA. And the argument was that the IDPA shooter felt as though there were a lot of rules, and it was very intimidating or difficult for a new shooter to get involved in IDPA. I said that there's hurdles, and new shooters tend to get a lot of procedural penalties because they really don't know what they're doing. They're shooting targets out of sequence. They're not doing this right. They're not staying behind cover, things like that. And I thought that was really interesting coming from an IDPA shooter. The USPSA shooter had the same typical arguments that you hear. The stages are kind of big, it's freestyle, you're sort of thrown into this. You're giving a stage diagram, you're told, okay, here's your stage, go shoot it, and it can be kind of overwhelming for a new shooter without that guidance. So that back and forth conversation that I sat in and listened to was really interesting because it went completely opposite of what I was expecting. As far as I'm concerned, I think you should, if you're interested in shooting one sport, I think you should research both and get into whatever excites you. For me, I got into USPSA shooting out of sheer convenience. The local club that I thought was holding regular USPSA matches is only 30 minutes away. The closest IDPA club is 45 minutes to an hour away. So I joined USPSA thinking that, okay, I'm going to shoot once a month at this club 30 minutes away. Well, it turns out that they're not shooting USPSA anymore. They're doing outlaw multi-gun stuff. And now I'm driving 45 minutes to an hour for the closest USPSA club. So it's kind of a wash. Had I known that when I initially started, I may have leaned towards the IDPA route because I like the idea of using my carry stuff and getting better with defensive style shooting, using cover, engaging targets in a more tactical sense, where I absolutely love USPSA. It's fun, it's fast paced, it gets your adrenaline pumping. It's just a really good time. However, if I had to do it all over again, I don't want to say that I'd bypass USPSA, but if that club weren't there and I had to pick one or the other, way back in July when I started shooting, I think I would have gone with IDPA. I'm glad that I went with USPSA, but that's a story for another time, and I've babbled on far too long on this particular subject. So head over to When the Balloon Goes Up, check out I Think I Know Why IDPA is Outpacing USPSA, and read through all the comments that are there. I haven't read through the last probably half of them, but the first half were really good and well worth reading, so check it out. Well, the second and final piece of featured content that I have is kind of a generic recommendation. I don't have a particular item to point you to. I just want to point you to a podcast in general, and that is the Gun Dudes podcast. I've been a listener for quite a while, but I went through a bit of a stretch where I just got kind of burnt out. I used to have approximately a 15-minute commute from my front door to where I work, and then I would spend about a half an hour in the car driving from work to the babysitter to pick up my daughter, then half an hour from the babysitter back home again. So I had roughly an hour and 15 minutes a day where I would listen to podcasts in my vehicle. I would burn a variety of podcasts to a data disk and then just play them in the head unit in my car. And I was doing that for a long period of time. I stopped listening to radio altogether. I couldn't stand the commercials and just the repetitiveness of everything that was being played on the radio. So I was much happier with listening to a variety of podcasts. One of the podcasts that I used to listen to continuously was the Gun Dudes podcast, and I was determined I was going to listen to every single episode they did. I started listening, I got hooked, and then once I got caught up, I started downloading past episodes, and I think I got back into episode 80-something before I got burned out. In addition to all of these Gun Dudes podcasts that I was listening to, I was listening to a variety of others. The Road Gunner, I just started listening to the Handgun World Show, Liberty or Zombie podcast, Empty Mags podcast at that point in time, the Rimfire podcast, and Pro Arms podcast. I was trying to get back through all of those early episodes as well, and it just got to the point where, day in and day out, I was just listening to these podcasts, and finally, I hit one particular episode of a podcast where it just felt like I was listening to an infomercial, and I got so annoyed that I hit eject when the disc popped out of the head unit. I grabbed it, I tossed it into the rear seat in my car, and I turned the radio on, and for a good month and a half, I didn't listen to a single podcast. And I was really missing it later in that month and a half stretch, and I decided, it's about time I get back into this. I really need to get caught up on these shows. And the first podcast that I started burning to disc was the Gun Dudes. It's a show with a lot of information, but there's a lot of humor mixed in, old movie references. There are a bunch of different guys that do the podcast, 4 or 5 I believe. There's a really good interaction between them. There's joking and laughing, and there's serious discussion topics. There's news. There's build information on guns, and just a really good, solid, all-around podcast. It's one of my absolute favorites, and I've got, from that month and a half, I've got quite a bit of catching up to do, but I'm pretty happy listening to all these podcasts again, and I'm just really happy to be listening to the Gun Dudes again. Stan and Carl being my favorite Gun Dudes, but just thought I would throw a little recommendation out there. In addition to the Gun Dudes, there are just a variety of other podcasts to listen to on the Gun Rights Radio Network. A lot of them are outstanding. Head over to the Gun Rights Radio Network, check out Gun Dudes, and check out all the other podcasts that are listed. Well, it is time for the cigar and drink pairing of the podcast, one of my favorite parts, where I get to talk about another passion that I have, and that is cigars. And the cigar that I'm doing this time is a repeat. However, I wanted to do a little bit of a twist. Several episodes ago, I did a cigar and drink pairing with the Ortega Cigar Serie D No. 10, I believe. And I really enjoyed the cigar, and I got to talking to Eddie Ortega just recently, and I was able to mooch some samplers off of him, where basically the sampler box, I think it has 4 or 5 cigars. It's basically one of each size in the line, and what I wanted to do was do a cigar and drink pairing of each size in the line. I know that it sounds like it's going to be kind of repetitive. However, different sizes yield different flavors and different nuances. So I thought it would be really interesting to discuss every size in the line, because I'm getting to the point now where I'm finding it really difficult to work cigars in that I haven't done already. I know there's an abundance of cigars available out there. However, I'm trying to work through what Mike has available and what I have from Mike over at Buckhead. And I know he's got the Serie D, and I know that he did have samplers. So this kind of works out in the sense that I can ease the strain on my wallet a little bit, because I was able to mooch a sampler off of Eddie Ortega, but it just sort of gives the show a little bit more of a dynamic where I can talk about different sizes and different nuances and things like that. So with all that said, let's talk about this cigar just a little bit. The number 10 versus the number 8, which I have now. I believe it's the number 8. It's a 5x52. It's got sort of an oval sort of box press to it. It's not quite a hard press, so it's got this funky sort of ovalish kind of shape to it. Versus the Bellicoso, which seemed a little richer. The flavor profile just seemed to have more character, a little bit more depth. Although this one's really nice. This one seems to be a little more powerful. The flavors seem to be a little more dominant, and it has more of a darker, sort of bitter, earthy sort of tone to it. So they're different. They have different nuances about them. I'm not quite sure which one I like more. I'm enjoying them both quite a bit, and I would highly recommend the Serie D number 10, which I've reviewed before or talked about before, and the Serie D number 8, which I'm smoking now. They're both very good cigars. This one is medium bodied, medium to full. This is something I would smoke later on in the evening. It goes really well with coffee, which is what I'm pairing it with. Just some Starbucks big size, whatever big is, and it's just black coffee. I don't like any crap in it. It just, I think it just tastes funky with cream and sugar and all that other stuff, so I drink it black. I've never been a really big fan of Starbucks coffee, but we were pretty much out and my wife was coming home from class, so I asked her to stop over somewhere, either Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, wherever had a drive-through, and just pick up some coffee so that I could do the podcast with a cup. And she came home with Starbucks. It's pairing pretty well, but Starbucks always seems to have this sort of funky-ish kind of aftertaste to it that I'm not real crazy about. But that is going to conclude the cigar and drink pairing. If you're interested in trying the Ortega Serie D cigars, you can contact Mike over at Buckhead Cigars. His phone number is 404-844-0400. The website over there is askthecigarguys.com. It's not a retail site, however, Mike has new product listed, featured product, and pricing information on 5-packs and boxes. Mike is also on Twitter, Facebook, and Google Plus as Buckhead Cigar. And if you're interested in getting a hold of a sampler, I know that Mike was carrying these. I don't know whether he has any in stock, but it's worth, shooting him a note, letting him know you want to try the sampler. They're not really expensive, and they'll allow you to get sort of a taster of everything within the Serie D line. You'll be able to taste the differences between the number 10 and the number 8 and the other numbers, which I'm not quite familiar with at this point. But, affordable buy, and you'll be supporting not only my favorite cigar retailer, but a fellow gun guy as well. Well, we're coming down the home stretch, and for the featured discussion portion of the podcast, I'm not quite sure what I wanted to do. I mean, I had something on my mind, and what I wanted to do was kind of think out loud. I'm in need of a new holster, and I'm in need of a new holster for USPSA shooting. When I initially started shooting, I was shooting with a Smith & Wesson M&P, and as I mentioned earlier, I picked up a Phobos roto holster. It was just a paddle holster made out of hard plastic with sort of a ratcheting system, so that the paddle that rested against your body was connected to the hard plastic holster, and there was sort of a gear in there where you could rotate the holster so that you can get the cant that you wanted. In addition to the rotation adjustment, it also had a retention screw. You would turn the screw in to tighten it to squeeze the gun tighter, or loosen the screw to back off the holster and allow less retention. And I was really happy with that holster. So happy, in fact, that when I switched over to the Glock platform, I picked up another Phobos holster. It's not a line that gets a lot of praise. However, because it treated me so well with the M&P, I thought it was just worth picking up another one. I'm having some problems with this Phobos holster for the Glock. If I turn in the retention screw even a little bit, it is far too tight, and when the buzzer goes off and I go to draw the gun, sometimes I can't even get the gun out of the holster without yanking on the thing and pulling my belt up, and my pants are moving around, and I've really got to muscle it out of the holster, and I'm not really happy with it. In order to get a smooth draw, I have to back the screw out almost completely so that it is not catching it's going through one half of the holster and not engaging the second half. And I'm afraid that over time the holster is going to loosen up a little bit, and for whatever reason I may be moving around and I'm just deathly afraid of the gun popping out when I'm running around during a stage. If we have a stage where you have to run from one box to another before drawing and loading, I don't want the gun to fall out of the holster, because that'll be a major problem. So I'm considering picking up a new holster, and I really don't know what route I want to go. Someone asked on the PAFOA forum about an outside the waistband holster for IDPA, and they had certain criteria. And I remembered seeing I believe it's a Sidewinder holster from Concealment Solutions, and I posted the link and told them, okay, this looks like it fits your criteria. It's a leather holster with a Kydex base. It's outside the waistband, and it's made in the model that it's made for the model gun that you're looking for. And when I made that recommendation, I started thinking, I wonder if this would work for me. Would a concealment type holster, or a holster that's meant for being tight to the body and concealing under a concealment garment or a cover garment, would that work for me? Would the Kydex create enough retention that I wouldn't have to worry about the gun popping out? I really like the way the holster looks. With the belt being fed through leather, I should get less sliding around my belt. I mean, I really like the Phobos holster, but one of the issues that I have is that it will ride around my waist a little bit. Even if I crank down on my belt, there's still a little bit of movement, and I'm wondering if a holster such as that Sidewinder holster will eliminate some of that movement because of the two contact points, or because of the two belt holes and the belt contacting more of the holster. And I'm kind of leaning towards maybe getting something similar to that. I know that Crossbreed offers a similar style holster. I forget what they call it. It's a hideous thing. It has a cross draw option where you can mount it on the opposing side, and it has like 3 belt holes or belt loops. And depending on which belt holes you feed your belt through, it works strong side or cross draw on your weak side. And personally, I think the thing is hideous, but I've had really good luck with my Crossbreed Super Tuck for my everyday carry gun, and I'm really happy with it, and I know that it's money well spent. However, it's got a Kydex portion that's kind of thin. I hear that Concealment Solutions uses a heavier Kydex. There are other holster makers that use this heavier Kydex. It's supposed to be a better quality. However, I don't know that these other holster companies like White Dog or Theiss holsters have an outside the waistband setup that may work for me with USPSA shooting. And again, the concern is that when I'm moving around, is that Kydex system going to be enough retention to stop the gun from coming out, versus the holster that I have now with a retention screw where I can really lock down the gun if I need to. So I'm giving some thought to this, going with one of these concealment style holsters. And one of the reasons I'm leaning away from Crossbreed is, even though I'm really happy with mine, Crossbreed is getting really, really big, and I'm afraid that I'm going to lose that personal touch with them. I mean, I'm constantly seeing advertisements on the Outdoor Channel, and just, they just seem to be growing and growing and growing, and I don't want to say that they're becoming like the Anheuser-Busch of concealment holsters, but I think they've grown so big at this point that I no longer view them as, that homegrown sort of mom and pop style shop where someone's tediously custom making the holsters. Whereas someone small like Concealment Solution, I think I would get more of a personal touch. So again, just kind of thinking out loud about my predicament and my potential options, I would like to ask your opinion. What would you suggest for an outside the waistband holster that would hold a gun during, some aggressive movements, running around, bouncing around? I need to make sure that the gun doesn't come out. So again, what would you recommend for this particular situation of mine? And that's it, I guess. And nothing. That's it. Well, before I let you get out of here, there are a couple of little things I want to mention, mostly how to contact me, but most importantly is that the Gun Rights Radio Network, which I'm a proud member of, needs your money to keep the lights on. Gun Rights Radio Network subscriptions cost $2 a month or $24 a year, and they go towards maintaining servers and just maintaining the Gun Rights Radio Network as a whole. So the Gun Rights Radio Network is in need of some of your money, so if you're interested, if you've got a couple of bucks to spare, head on over to the Gun Rights Radio Network. I'll have a link in the show notes that you can click and check out the donations page, and it would be greatly appreciated. As far as the contact information, if you would like to contact me, there are a variety of ways to do so. I said something controversial, something you didn't like, something you did like, something that you want to talk further about. There's a number of ways to get in touch with me. The easiest way to do that would be to head over to waltinpa.com and click on the contact link. It will open up a web form. You just punch in your email address, your subject line, and the body of the email. Click send, it'll fire it off, and I will definitely get it. If you prefer to do it yourself, you can just open up your mail client, put me in as Walt at waltinpa.com, fill in the rest of the stuff, hit send, and I will get that as well. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+. Twitter is Walt W. Facebook and Google+ are Walt White. My blog, Walt NPA, also has a Facebook page. You'll just need to do a quick search for Walt NPA on Facebook. It should pop up. You can click like, and you'll get updates of all the gun-related stuff that I do on my blog. Again, one last reminder for the May contest. If you're interested in winning a signed copy of Shoot Your Guide to Shooting in Competition by Julie Golob, head over to waltinpa.com. Look for the May contest announcement. Click on it. Read the details. Throw your entry in the comment form, and you will be entered to win a free copy of that book. So that's going to do it. Thanks for downloading, listening, watching, and or subscribing. And until next time, take it easy.
You can now hear Gun Rights Radio Network while you're on the go with Stitcher Smart Radio. On-demand news, talk, and more on your mobile phone. The latest episode is always available for you. No syncing needed and no memory or storage wasted. Available for your iPhone, Android phones, or your BlackBerry. Downloading is easy. Go to Stitcher.com or check out your app store. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.